The intercepted Plath listening post on Titan was humanity's ear pressed against the cosmos, built into the methanized cliffs overlooking Kraken Mare. It represented Earth's most ambitious attempt to hear what the universe had to say. Sarah Chen had been monitoring the arrays for 3 years now, and she'd grown accustomed to the silence punctuated only by pulsars and distant stellar winds. That Tuesday started like any other. Sarah floated through the observation dome, checking readings while sipping recycled coffee that tasted vaguely of rust. The massive dish arrays outside turned slowly, sweeping across the heavens in their eternal search. She was about to log another quiet shift when her console erupted in alerts. The signal was unlike anything in their databases. It pulsed with mathematical precision, carrying layers of encoded information that screamed intelligence. Sarah's hands trembled as she isolated the frequency and began recording. This wasn't random cosmic noise or a distant pulsar. Someone, somewhere, was broadcasting with purpose. Within an hour, the small listening post transformed into a hive of activity. Dr. James Okonkwo, the station's lead cryptographer, arrived from his quarters with his shirt inside out, too excited to care. Lisa Martinez, their xenolinguist, practically crashed through the doorway, tablet already running translation algorithms. Even old Commander Russell emerged from his office, his weathered face showing an emotion Sarah had never seen before. Hope, the signal repeated every 17 minutes, growing slightly weaker each time. James worked his magic on the encryption while Lisa attacked the linguistic patterns. Sarah maintained the connection, adjusting for solar interference and the moon's rotation as hours turned into a full day. The message began revealing its secrets. The breakthrough came when Lisa recognized a mathematical constant embedded in the signal. The senders had included a Rosetta Stone of sorts, using universal constants to build a translation matrix. Letter by letter, word by word, the message emerged from the static. What they found changed everything. The message came from a species calling themselves the Quillari. Their homeworld, located in a system 43 light-years away, faced annihilation. But they weren't broadcasting to the cosmos, hoping for rescue. The signal was a focused beam meant for their colony worlds, warning them to flee. It contained evacuation protocols, survival caches locations, and desperate instructions for preserving their culture. Humanity had simply been in the path of their transmission, an accidental eavesdropper on a civilization's death cry. The Quillari described themselves as builders and artists, a species that had achieved spaceflight through cooperation rather than competition. They had no word for war in their language until recently. The message had to borrow terms from their medical vocabulary to describe violence. They were being systematically destroyed by something they called the a species that consumed entire biospheres to fuel their expansion. Sarah read through the translations, her heart breaking with each line. The Quillari wrote of beautiful crystalline cities that sang in harmony with their planet's magnetic field. They described vast libraries of accumulated knowledge, millions of years of art and science about to be destroyed. They spoke of their children hidden in deep shelters, hoping against hope that the monsters would pass them by. Commander Russell called an emergency meeting in the station's cramped conference room. The 5 senior staff members crowded around a table designed for 3, their faces illuminated by the holographic display showing the Quillari star system. The commander's voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his inner turmoil. The question before them was simple yet impossible. What should humanity do with this information? James spoke first, ever the pragmatist. These people never asked for our help. We don't know if they'd even want it. We could be walking into a situation we don't understand, risking Earth's safety for strangers who might not thank us for it. His words hung heavy in the recycled air. Lisa countered immediately. They didn't ask because they don't know we exist. But we know they exist now. We know they're peaceful. We know they're about to be exterminated. How can we just sit here and do nothing? Her passion filled the small room, making it feel even more claustrophobic. Sarah pulled up the technical data embedded in the message. There's something else to consider. The Quellery included their transit technology in this broadcast. It's more advanced than anything we have. If we could reverse engineer it, we could reach them in weeks instead of decades. But that same technology could also lead the Devourers back to Earth if we're not careful. The debate raged for hours. They discussed the prime directive from ancient science fiction, the moral obligation to help those in need, the practical risks of intervening in an alien conflict. Commander Russell listened to every argument, his expression unreadable. Finally, he stood and walked to the viewport overlooking Titan's methane lakes. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of humanity's future. 20 years ago, I watched my daughter die from a disease we couldn't cure. 6 months later, a research team on Mars discovered the treatment in an extremophile bacteria. If they'd found it sooner, she'd still be alive. He turned to face his team. The Quellery are dying right now, while we have the means to help them. Maybe we'll fail. Maybe we'll make things worse. But I'd rather try and fail than live knowing we did nothing. Sarah felt tears in her eyes as the commander continued. I'm transmitting everything to Earth Command, but I'm also recommending immediate action. If the politicians want to debate, let them. Meanwhile, we're going to figure out how to save these people. The next 72 hours blurred together. Earth's Command's response was predictably chaotic. Some leaders wanted to hide, others to observe, still others to send diplomats. But while the politicians argued, something extraordinary happened in the shipyards of Mars. Engineers who'd read the technical specifications began working without official orders. Volunteers from every nation started arriving at launch sites. Humanity's response wasn't organized by any government. It was a grassroots movement of people who refused to let another species die while they watched Captain Marcus Webb of the experimental starship Endeavour was the first to volunteer his vessel. The ship had been designed for long-range exploration, but Webb's crew immediately began modifications based on the Quellery transit equations. Other captains followed suit. Within a week, humanity had assembled a ragtag fleet of 37 ships, each one modified with barely tested alien technology. Sarah found herself appointed as cultural liaison, her familiarity with the message making her invaluable. As she packed her few belongings for the journey, she looked at the printed translation of the Quellar message one more time. One phrase stood out. We sing our last song into the darkness, hoping our melody will be remembered. Standing in the Endeavour's observation deck, as the fleet prepared to jump, Sarah made a promise to the universe. Your song was heard, she whispered to the stars, and we're coming. Asterisk against all odds. The jump through folded space felt like being turned inside out while solving a complex equation. Sarah gripped the railings as reality twisted around the human fleet. The Quellery transit technology bending the laws of physics in ways their scientists barely understood. When the universe snapped back into focus, 37 human ships found themselves in orbit around a world of impossible beauty. The Quellery homeworld shimmered like an opal against the cosmic dark. Crystalline cities caught their sun's light and refracted it into rainbow spirals. Even from orbit, Sarah could see the geometric perfection of their architecture, structures that seemed to grow from the planet itself rather than being built upon it. But she could also see the darkness spreading from the northern continent, a creeping void where cities had once stood. Captain Webb's voice echoed through the ship. "All stations report. Are we intact?" The responses came back mixed. 3 ships had emerged from the jump with significant damage. 2 others were missing entirely, lost somewhere between the stars. But 32 human vessels had made it, carrying 8,000 volunteers who'd left everything behind for this moment. The first Quellery transmission reached them within minutes. Sarah's translation equipment, hastily modified during the journey, converted the musical tones into words. The message was one of confusion and desperate hope. The Quelari couldn't understand who these new arrivals were or why they'd come, but they begged for help with a desperation that transcended species. Sarah worked with Lisa to craft humanity's response. They explained how humans had accidentally intercepted the evacuation message, how they'd decoded it and come to help. The silence that followed lasted 17 agonizing minutes. Then the Quelari responded with what Sarah could only describe as the sound of weeping transformed into mathematics. The tactical situation became clear as the Quellar shared their data. The Devourers weren't just destroying, they were harvesting. Their massive bioships literally consumed organic matter, breaking down entire ecosystems into fuel for their ever-expanding fleet. They'd already consumed 3 of the 12 Quelari continents. At their current rate, the planet would be stripped bare in 6 days. Commander Mitchell of the warship Thunder Road, humanity's most experienced combat veteran, studied the enemy positions with growing concern. The Devourer ships were each the size of a small city, organic monstrosities that defied conventional warfare. Human weapons seemed laughably inadequate against such creatures. But Mitchell had noticed something the peaceful Quellery had missed. The Devourers moved in predictable patterns, following the richest sources of biological matter. They avoided the planet's desert regions and ice caps, focusing on forests and oceans. They were driven by hunger, not strategy. Mitchell proposed something insane. They could use that hunger against them. The plan required cooperation between species that had never met face to face. Sarah coordinated with Quellery scientists while human engineers worked around the clock. They would turn the planet's largest ocean into a trap. Using the Quellery's own technology, they'd create a massive biological signature, a fake feast, that would draw every Devourer ship to one location. Dr. Okonkwo worked with the Quellerist quantum harmonics, their method of manipulating matter through sound. Combined with humanity's nuclear technology, they could create something neither species could achieve alone, a resonance bomb that would disrupt the Devourers at a molecular level. It wouldn't destroy them, but it would force them into hibernation. Their hunger finally satisfied by a feast of pure energy. The Quelari were hesitant. Their entire philosophy revolved around creation, not destruction. Even facing extinction, they struggled with the concept of weapons. Sarah spent hours in communication with their leaders, explaining humanity's perspective. Sometimes, she told them, the greatest act of creation is preventing destruction. Sometimes, protecting beauty requires standing against those who would destroy it. As the trap took shape, humanity got its first close look at the Devourers. They were nothing like the monsters humans had imagined. Each bioship was actually a colony organism, billions of smaller creatures acting as one. They weren't evil, just following their nature, like locusts swarming across the cosmos. This revelation made the situation more tragic, but didn't change what needed to be done. The bait was set on the 5th day. Every human ship contributed something: radioactive materials, biological waste, even personal belongings rich with human DNA. The Quelari added their own contribution, singing a harmonic frequency that spread the full signature across half the planet. Then everyone waited. The Devourers took the bait completely. All 17 of their massive bioships converged on the trapped ocean, their feeding tendrils extending down into what they believed was the richest feast they'd ever encountered. That's when humanity sprang the trap. The resonance bomb detonated, not with an explosion, but with a song. The Quelari's harmonic technology, amplified by human nuclear power, created a frequency that matched the Devourer's own biological rhythm. The massive organisms began to slow, their constant hunger finally satiated by the energy pulse. One by one, the bioships entered a hibernation state, drifting like sleeping giants in the planet's upper atmosphere. But the victory came at a cost. 3 human ships, positioned too close to the resonance field, lost all power. Their crews, 243 volunteers, managed to evacuate to escape pods, but would spend days drifting before rescue. The Quelari cities nearest to the trap suffered structural damage from the harmonics, their crystalline buildings cracking like broken bells. The aftermath was a mixture of joy and exhaustion. The Devourers remained in hibernation, thereby carefully moved by combined human Quelari teams to a distant moon where they could sleep without threatening anyone. Some argued they should be destroyed, but both species ultimately agreed that genocide, even against such dangerous creatures, wasn't the answer. First contact between humans and Quelari happened gradually. The species were so different that direct meeting required careful preparation. The Quelari experienced the world primarily through sound and vibration, their crystalline bodies resonating with their environment. Humans, with their chaotic neural patterns and chemical emotions, were almost incomprehensible to them at first. Sarah was part of the first delegation to set foot on the Quelari homeworld. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, making every step feel like a small leap. The air smelled of ozone and something sweet, like honey mixed with copper. But it was the sound that overwhelmed her. The entire planet hummed with life, every structure and being contributing to a global symphony. The Quelari who greeted them stood 12 feet tall, their bodies resembling living prisms that caught and refracted light. When they spoke, it wasn't through mouths, but through their entire being, creating harmonics that Sarah's equipment translated into words. Their leader, a being whose name translated roughly as resonance of dawn, expressed gratitude that transcended language. You heard our cry when it wasn't meant for you. Resonance of dawn sang. You came when we had no right to expect help. You fought for us when fighting was against our nature. How do we thank saviors who appeared from nowhere? Captain Webb, speaking for humanity, responded simply, "You don't thank us, you pass it on. Someday, somewhere, someone else will need help. When that happens, you'll be there." That's how the universe becomes a better place, one rescue at a time. The exchange of technology and culture that followed transformed both species. The Quelari's harmonic technology revolutionized human medicine and engineering. Humanity's chaotic creativity and adaptive thinking gave the Quelari new ways to approach problems. Together, they developed defenses against future devourer swarms and began exploring ways to rehabilitate the hibernating creatures. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The Quillari had believed the universe was fundamentally harmonious, that discord was an aberration. Humans had believed the universe was fundamentally chaotic, that order was imposed by conscious will. Together, they discovered a third truth. The universe was both, and neither. And the gap between harmony and chaos could be bridged by compassion. As Sarah stood in a Quillari city 6 months later, watching human and alien children play together, in gardens that sang with each footstep, she thought about the message that started it all. The Quillari had broadcast their evacuation signal to their own colonies, never imagining that strangers would intercept it, decode it, and risk everything to help. The universe, Sarah realized, was full of messages not meant for human ears. Conversations between stars, songs of distant civilizations, cries for help that echoed through the void. Humanity had accidentally heard one such message and chosen to act. In doing so, they denounced themselves to the cosmos not as conquerors or explorers, but as something much more powerful, neighbors willing to help. The Quillari rebuilt their cities, incorporating human architectural concepts that made them more defensible while maintaining their beauty. Humans established a permanent embassy on the planet, a building that somehow managed to look both utterly alien and perfectly at home among the crystal spires. The two species began joint missions to find and protect other peaceful civilizations from threats like the Devourers. Years later, when the story of humanity's intervention spread throughout the galaxy, other species would ask why humans risked so much for strangers. The answer became humanity's calling card among the stars, a simple phrase that defined their role in the cosmic community. Because we heard you, the message was never meant for them, but humanity heard it anyway. And, in responding, they didn't just save a species, they found their purpose among the stars.